Here's a dilemma for you. Okay, let me see if you can wrap your heads around this one, because I often struggle to wrap my head around this one. Let's talk about financial anxiety. Let's talk about when things are tough. This is pertinent for today's situation for most people, I would say, because it's a high cost of living. We have a lot of financial issues. Many parts of the world, Australia is one of them. You've got property affordability. You've got all sorts of issues right now. And what the funny thing is, I noticed. Obviously, it's naturally stressful when you can't afford things. When you think about the future, and especially if you're providing for other people and you've got mouths to feed, then obviously there's a lot of pressure that comes with the finances. But one of these things that's interesting is where you see financial anxiety and where you don't. Now, at the stage of life I'm at, and friends who are getting married and things like that, I am something of a consoling ear, or a confidant for sort of youngish men who are facing the burden of familyhood and the many costs to come. And so I am often the sympathetic ear. That's the word I was looking for, the sympathetic ear. And, friends and young men and cousins and all this will lament how much things cost and how much they're going to cost them. And it is a cause for anxiety. And it is a cause for anxiety for young men, not just young men, but youngish men, who actually have pretty good jobs, probably earn a decent salary. Doesn't make them rich, doesn't even make them able to, afford any property they like. Maybe they still need help, I don't know. But, these are people working in the big office towers and so forth. Now, in the quote-unquote day job that I do, kind of get chucked into a bit of a different world. And this is the world of the people who are renters, right? And a lot of rent, because you do applications for people who take on rental properties. So when I'm involved in that process, you see what people earn, and you see how they, because you often see bank statements and stuff. So you see, it's a very unique opportunity, that you don't abuse it, to see what people earn, and how they live and how they spend. And often there's a lot of people who kind of live week to week. Now, I do not have a divine insight into what all these people experience. Some people open up about their woes, some people don't. But for the most part, the vibe I get is often the people who live in quote-unquote the renting world, and the ones I talk to, at least, or talk to about their situation, they don't seem to be the ones who are as stressed. Sometimes we're talking to them about their rent going up and things like that, and if you know Sydney, there's been some meteoric rent rises in recent years for a bunch of factors to do with probably COVID aftermath and interest rates and global economy and blah, blah, blah. So there's been a lot of big rent hikes, and that's not fun. And that's this, I'm not making light of that. It's a difficult part of the job. But you talk to people about the situation, and we try to talk to them about it. And it's often interesting, the perspective you get. Whereas often the people who are unloading more of that anxiety, and they might just be because they're friends and whatnot, when you talk more about this stuff with your friends, or you relate, to guys going through a similar life stage as you, but it's interesting that the financial anxiety isn't necessarily correlated with the level of finance, with one's earning. I'm not saying it's the opposite, right? I'm not saying that no one who is, no one in this kind of, more straightforward everyday lifestyle He's not doing it tough. And those are those people who are kind of my age or my demographic. Not saying they're all kind of freaking out or anything like that. I'm just saying there doesn't seem to be, from where I'm looking at all this, a neat correlation between one's income or one's position and one's financial anxiety. Thus, naturally making me curious and wonder, as my wandering mind will do, is the root of financial anxiety financial pressure? Or is it something else, or are there other factors? Now that's very interesting. That's very interesting. Why would young men who admittedly can't really afford much, who have good jobs, good prospects, families who are kind of well off, or at least well enough to help them out or bail them out of a tough situation if it should arise, which is unlikely because they have more or less good jobs. Why is there so much anxiety there versus people who probably materially have even less and less of a family, maybe support network and safety net? I don't know what's going on. One thing that's interesting is what you might look at is sort of social context and culture. Now, in a world where everyone kind of, let's say in a group where everyone kind of rents the place they live and sees that as the way they're going to live for the foreseeable future, because that's maybe it's the only option. Maybe they'd love to have the option to buy a place or whatever, but that's not maybe realistic for them at this point in time. All right, so in a culture like that, I'm guessing people are more kind of accepting. That's the wicket. I got to deal with it. And then I think about sort of these other pockets maybe of our society where people received expensive educations, where they come from a little bit more privilege, okay, or a good kind of starting point. Maybe their parents have really distinguished careers. Their parents own lots of assets. And maybe there's this implicit, unspoken, or unconscious even, expectation that they've tagged themselves with that in future they will be of the same position. They will be quite well off. They will have, a nice little fleet of assets. They will be living comfortably. And they expect to be in a group of people that do that, which is not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. Not even slightly a bad thing. Just a way one imagines one's life. And darn it, I'm wondering if that accounts for what I'll call the anxiety discrepancy here. Geez, that's a nice word, anxiety discrepancy. That makes me goddamn curious. Are we anxious to a point of reality? Or are we anxious to a point of unreality? Which is basically me trying to sound very intelligent by saying, is the anxiety to do with the money really more to do with ego? With the idea we have of ourselves, where we'll be at, how we assess our worth, maybe if it's a young man, how a young man assesses his worth, and so they should aspire to support a family if they want to have a family, and that's fine, but how much of this is to do with the reality of what money we need to live, and how much of this is a reaction to that and an extra burden we layer on top? And it's quite funny the humour of my situation is a relatively young man who doesn't have any dependents at this point in time. Might be nice to have at some point some dependents. It's always nice to be depended on, but doesn't have them at this point in time. Who has quite a comfortable kind of situation in terms of family support, and yet a man who has had financial anxiety repeatedly for many years, on and off. And how from that place, I'm very often formulating plans from that place. And it's funny how, say it's a business idea or a job idea, think about what that could earn. It's funny how that's whatever it can earn is never enough. See, I meet rich people with financial anxiety. I meet rich people very often who are very worried about money because they got big bills to pay. Now, the easy way out is to not have big bills to pay. And it's easy when you're not in a culture of, say, of sending children to private schools, right? It's very easy to look at that as something that's very expendable. You look at that as a luxury, maybe. Even though it's for kids, it's not necessarily for you, although we could talk about who that's for another time. So that's interesting, but we can all appreciate what looks like a luxury to someone else doesn't feel like a luxury to us. It feels essential, or it feels important, or it feels like it's something we're aiming for, maybe something we're excited about, something we value. Yeah, we could live without it, but we don't want to. And so you meet people who put pressure on themselves. For example, they've been, that's a good example, I reckon, private school education. They've been privately schooled, educated. They've had an expensive education. And the obligation they feel is to maybe give their kids the same thing, thus loading on more pressure. So there's this quote about two men, one surviving on lentils and one is living in the king's court. And the one living in the king's court goes to the guy eating lentils. He goes, if you only served the king, you wouldn't have to live on lentils. And the guy living on lentils says, if you learnt to live on lentils, you wouldn't have to serve the king. Thus is the dilemma of capitalist society, my friends. Thus is the dilemma. Are the lentils shit? Are the lentils shit? Can you stomach the lentils? Can you stomach the lentils? Or would you rather just serve the king and bloody hell have caviar and all the other mouth orgasm-y stuff? What do you choose? I don't know. But it's never enough. Why is it never enough? Can someone tell me why, when you're playing the survival game, when all you want to do is Walter White, provide for your family, provide for yourself, when you're tortured by the burden of providing for people who are not yet even born, and you're doing it for them, why isn't the money ever enough? And I guess another factor in all this is, and men talk about this stuff, we talk about this. When I'm talking to blokes, good blokes, honest blokes, God-fearing blokes, or at least respectful of the idea. When I'm talking to these lads, they're not after that much, but sometimes they're in a job that just doesn't do it for them. When you're in a job, maybe that's all jobs. Maybe that's what jobs are meant to be. But when it just doesn't do it for you, it's just, So, when you're in that place, the money's never enough, really. The money's never enough. And this is my theory as to why. Because we all have to play the game of bribing ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, we very rarely have another choice, right? And I'm bribing myself to do this thing I don't like. So if I have to bribe myself, then I'll always want more. Because the bribery doesn't change the reality of the task. Does that make sense? The bribery doesn't change what it is. If I was cleaning gutters and you said, Joe, I'll pay you $500,000 to clean gutters this week, I'll go, great. But if you go, Joe, I'll give you $500,000 a year to clean gutters, so I'm cleaning gutters all year, what am I going to do? I'm going to start doing it because that's some good money right there. That's more money than you get selling books that are ahead of their time. So I'm going to start cleaning gutters for you. But then I'm going to do this for a while and be like, not loving it. And then I'll just be thinking about, if I really want to keep doing this, I need more money. Or I'll just stop because I'm like, the money's not worth it. So if I stay on this train, right, if I keep cleaning gutters, I ask you for more money, right? And then you up it. And so what does that do? Does that change the gutter cleaning issue? Probably not. I might just put up with it and accept the shitness of it, but I'll always want more because all I've gotten is a bit of relief. All I've gotten is a bit of relief. So when that relief wears off, when the painkiller wears off of that pay rise, I'm just going to want more. Capiche? And then somehow, this vortex of financial anxiety is still turning through this time. Because now I'm playing games of, bloody hell, if I quit this, how much cash do I have? What's my runway in the bank? Where am I going to replace that? Because I've started buying things. I got a mortgage because now I can afford a mortgage. That mortgage doesn't pause for passion. You know what I mean? Can't talk to the mortgage about your lack of contentment at work, can you? So that kind of keeps going. That doesn't stop. And any of the other commitments that were easy, or the other habits that have now formed, or the sort of dinners you have now, or the sort of things you buy, or the sort of people you hang out with now because of what you can pay, those things don't go back, They don't move with you. They stay constant. Unless you unenroll from them. Herein lies the dilemma. Lentils. Lentils? I'm not eating lentils. I can't live on lentils. I don't want to live on lentils. So, that's the dilemma. Where is financial anxiety correlated with one's actual earning? And what's the gap attributed to? Bloody hell, it's just deep shit. Why do I go so deep? Why can't I just let things be? I don't know. I don't know.